Particularly, I'm standing here on behalf of my Iranian constituents and in full solidarity with the Iranian people in their fight against their oppressive and abusive regime. And on behalf of so many constituents in Putney, Roehampton and Southfields have contacted me about the situation. I know it's breaking many hearts, and I've met with people in my surgeries and on the streets. I bump into people who say how much they would like me to speak out about what is happening in Iran. And they themselves have been on protests in London, protests that they can go to without fear of being kidnapped on the way to that protest, wrongly thought to be going to that protest, and therefore thrown into prison, given a sham trial, tortured and abused, as so many young people in Iran are facing. And it's been heartbreaking to hear those stories about people going to protest, just as young people in Putney do all the time, and yet suffering that abuse. I will give way.
Roger, and I thank my friend for allowing me to intervene. The truth of the matter is that if any of us were to make a speech like we've made this morning or this afternoon, in Iran, we'd be dead meat very quickly. We are extremely lucky to be able to speak as we do and condemn this awful regime. And all I can say is we have got to make as much noise as we can to try and get rid of it.
Yeah. I welcome that intervention, and I really believe that that is what we're doing in this debate today, which I am pleased to be able to join in with those members from across the House who are united in so many ways on this issue. On the 8th of January, one person was killed by the regime who had been to visit his parents' gravestones, was wrongly thought to be part of a protest that was taking place nearby, and that resulted in him being murdered by the regime and sentenced to death. The extensive use of force against protesters is horrific. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has said that there have been more than 300 people killed in this latest crackdown by the regime, including 40 children. Over 18,000 people have been arrested and a reported 488 people have been killed. We know that the mistreatment of women has been a brutal reality for Iranian women for many years, both domestic and overseas. And this is a state sanction of misogyny and murder by the regime of women on a mass scale. I've spoken previously to support the brave women and girls of Iran in their protests and the abhorrence of the death in police custody of the 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, the same age as one of my daughters. And it really brings home to me, these young people are being so brave in their protests, just the same age as my children, who should so easily be facing the same situation as so many in Iran are. And the online harassment, the kidnapping and execution of so many others. Colleagues have raised the 26 individuals currently at risk of execution without fair trial for made-up offences, and I'd like to add my voice to those calling for their immediate release. One of those individuals who has since been hanged was 22-year-old karate champion Mehdi Karamini, who had dreams of one day competing in the Olympics and has won numerous medals for Iran in various competitions. Mehdi's last words were, "Dad, they've reached a verdict. Mine is execution by hanging. Don't tell Mum." Mehdi was a proud Iranian patriot who wanted to live a normal life and stand up for his country at home and abroad. It's just heartbreaking. Another raised today is Alreza Akbi, a dual national, a UK citizen who's been denied representation, denied legal process, is on death row with imminent execution fate, and his family have been called in for a final meeting. The Foreign Secretary has denounced his treatment as politically motivated, and I hope to hear from the Minister about what actions have been taken by our diplomats to secure his release and not his murder. We cannot stay silent. The IRGC is destabilising the region, has also been mentioned. It goes far beyond just the context of Iran itself. Not least in Lebanon, which I visited last year, and I've spoken to community leaders this week about its current political disarray and its economic collapse, fuelled in part by the actions of Hezbollah under the patronage of Iran. The government could be doing more in relation to the ongoing abuses of human rights in Iran, and to the activity of the IRGC on British soil as well. So, what can we do? Firstly, we must continue to stand firmly against the Iranian regime. The government's announcement of sanctions against certain regime figures is very welcome, but these should be the start of more. We must continue to ramp up our sanctions regime, bringing to justice human rights abusers from the bloody 2019 crackdown as well. The government, I hope to hear later that the Minister has been thinking seriously about new sanctions against the regime, sanctions against family of those members already sanctioned, and how we can ratchet these up. Secondly, we must maximise support for Iranians on the ground. For example, we could consider to ensure all political prisoners in Iran have political sponsorships in the UK, following the similar moves by politicians in Germany, which has saved Iranian lives and overturned death sentences. We need to make sure that Iranians have internet access so they're able to facilitate and organise protests, and welcome Iranian refugees here with open arms. The government should give Iranians who are fighting with their lives the options to flee and issue visas to those, especially people who have been given death sentences in Iran, and those women who are leading the protests at the moment. So I want to end by posing 5 questions to the government. First, will the Minister confirm today, as has been asked by so many members across the House, plans to proscribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in full in the coming days? If not now, when? The government should move quickly to decide whether to follow the US and other countries to formally proscribe them. Secondly, can I ask what plans the Minister has to expand the sanctions regime to other Iranian human rights abusers? For example, against the then Technology Minister Mohammad Javad Azari Jahromi and the IRGC commander Salah Abnoush. 3. Does the Minister agree that now is the time to speak the truth plainly when calling out Tehran's malign behaviour, including being bold enough to label the regime's state hostage-taking policies for what they really are? Fourth, there is a large Iranian diaspora in the UK, including in my constituency, who are fearing for their family and friends in Iran and in desperate worry because they often cannot hear from them. But the community is under threat here too. Can the Minister set out what the UK is doing to ensure the safety of British Iranian journalists and tackle pro-Iranian extremism, which we have seen here in the UK? And fifth, what would it take for the government to take steps to expel the Iranian diplomats here? I understand the consequences of that would be our diplomats being expelled also from Tehran. So could the Minister outline the benefit of our diplomats staying in Tehran, and that would be the reason not to expel the diplomats here, but also what really would it take? What are the red lines by which we will then expel the diplomats here? We cannot continue to say this is a regime similar to others. This has gone far beyond that, as we've heard today. The clock is ticking, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Since we even broke for our last recess, more innocent Iranian citizens were executed. Every second counts. Feet dragging costs lives. Those brave souls who have stood up against the brutal regime need all the help that we can give them. I end with solidarity for the people of Iran, support for a democratic solution, and to stand up for all other victims of oppressive and brutal regimes across the world as well. Women, life, freedom.
Yeah.